We have a pretty full hour's worth of information, so try to get right to the point and keep it as short as we can. First thing on that agenda is the union contract, Red Lodge City employees. Pete, do you want to give us an overview of the contract?
Well, actually, Teresa and I were the initial contacts, and we had a very successful, I would not even say bargaining, I would say it was a conversational series of meetings, and Teresa did the heavy work. We came to an agreement on almost everything, and I believe it's been put into a final form, but I'll defer now to.
Right, just so everybody knows, we met a couple different times. First, we met with the union steward for staff, along with a staff member. We were presented with a list of suggested changes that they were asking for. Pete and I carried that listing, reviewed it both with the mayor and Lonnie for purposes of the budget and processes, make sure things were possible that were being asked for and what the responses were. We went back and forth. So that occurred 2 times on each side. We came up with the changes that were accepted were updated within the document that everybody has. And with that, I believe we're ready to see if there were any other questions from council or from the public or anyone before we would motion to approve that.
Discussion on council on the contract.
All right, that's 3 weeks.
Dave.
Mayor, the only question or conversation I had to do with the updates in the voluntary transfer. First off, thank you very much to Pete and Teresa. Teresa in particular for sending out the copy that showed the marked up versions. This section is, I want to say, section 17 from my memory. Depending on which version of the document you're looking at, the painting, it has to do with filling vacancies or posting them internally. And there were 2 concerns I have, which I want to voice just so that others hear that. And then I'll share my recommendation. The changes basically state that if there's an opening, it had to do, I think my understanding is it had to do with helping improve potential churn in-house. And so if there's an opening in a position, what will happen is we'll post it internally for 5 days before we post it externally. And if we have anybody who meets the base requirements, they basically get that job without having to compete against any external candidates. The 2 concerns I have is that in my mind doesn't necessarily ensure that we're going to get the best candidate for jobs, was the first concern. And the second concern is that it potentially adds a 5-day delay before we start advertising for external positions. Having raised that, I also do not want to put the city or feel comfortable putting the city in a position of not handling negotiations in good faith. And so I raised those concerns, but I'm inclined to go ahead and vote in favor of it and just say we revisit that clause in 3 years when it comes up again. But I think it's probably something we could have, if we had handled the delegation and the meeting, I think a little bit more like other boards that I've seen, including our school boards, I think we'd have probably identified some of those things earlier on. But given that this is where we are in the position, I say we go with it.
Right,
I'm done. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Teresa.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, I understand your concerns, but there was a lot of discussion. The council members, Pete, myself did represent, the interests of the city. The mayor had also considered the changes. You're forgetting that on the back end, if this is an application, it's not a shoo-in. It's not a guarantee. They have to be qualified and they self-apply. They could still be turned down based on their performance and record, right? So there's no, it's not that you're getting a lesser applicant filling a position just because, right? Just because they're internal. And at the same time, you may be postponing an external posting for 5 days, but you're also expediting the posting of the position that they're vacating. You're moving that up. So it's a trade-off. But it is, I think, when you look at it another way, it's a way of preserving the knowledge base and the expertise within the staff that we already have in the city. So I thought that it actually emulates what corporations do everywhere: hire from within first or offer that opportunity.
And I do appreciate that, and I guess, like I said, my core is still, I think an internal candidate, in fairness, would have an edge against external candidates just by virtue of the institutional knowledge they already have. But like I said, not how I would have done it is not grounds for me to vote no on it. I just, and for the record, I had reached out to Teresa and we had this conversation. So this is not we discussed it and talked about it. And I shared with her that was a concern that I was going to raise tonight. But at that same time, I also felt comfortable moving forward with it because, like I said, there is a legal expectation and requirement that when you send folks to the table to do negotiating, that they are empowered to do so, and I don't want to stand in the way of that.
Any other comments on the union contract? Everybody's good? Let's move right on down the line there. That's the contract for services for Diane Barris, your administrative assistant for the police department. It's essentially the same contract that we've done every year for her. Comments? Yes, Teresa.
Just to double check, I know that things change, technology changes, experience. The remote location, working from remote is acceptable. Are there any concerns among police department or yourself, Mayor, about the continuation of security for either the laptop or the content?
I have no problem with that. Greg? No, Mayor, no problem. Okay. Any other discussion on contractor services? All right. Airport board report for information. Who is presenting? And if whoever's presenting that, please get up, state your name, address of residence. Try to keep it.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I know what I'm gonna get Thursday morning. Keep it short, Bill.
So, yeah, Bill Bullock, Carbon County Commissioner, 900 Kainuu Avenue, Red Lodge, Montana, also Red Lodge, Carbon County Airport Board member. Just a quick comment on the airport, a little bit of background for those of you that are not familiar with it. So we have the airport here, it's city property. The city owns the property and receives the lease payments for the property, and the county manages the function of the airport. We have a pretty active group of members and users of the airport. Historically, we've always gotten by on the county contribution, which is roughly, it's $1 million of money that goes to the functioning of the airport, $40,000 and change at the end of the day. And then the balance to keep the airport up, pave the runway, make it function, make it run and drive, is through grants, either through historically has been the Montana State Department of Transportation, the Aeronautics Bureau. This last year, we went in to apply for some funds because the airport runway is getting pretty old. Needs to either get resurfaced or some more maintenance has to be done. We went through the round of funding with MDT and did not come out successful and were turned down pretty harshly. So that kind of put the kibosh on a lot of activities for the board and for this airport for the coming year. Rather than give up, we went back to the Federal Aviation Administration and made the inquiry as to funding from them. They had some requirements that we're pursuing as far as studying the feasibility of the airport, and we finally just got them back to the table. Looking forward into the future, it's a bigger pot of money for a better enhancement facility. Their concern was a lot of the development. I mean, it's a very developed area and getting to be. Their concerns historically going back into the early 80s when they walked away was some of the development that was occurring, and it's their decision, their discretion, and their ability to either approve or deny anything that's going on up there insofar as the airport goes. some things that were brought up insofar as site distances and runway lengths and some of the buildings that are there can be there, things they'll say no to, they brought up. I would ask that the city keep that in mind as things move forward and as funding opportunities come up, because it's we just got them back to the table. The airport board members and the board itself would not like to see a reason for them to say no to any kind of future funding because of the fact that it is a better avenue to pursue the improvement of this facility. With that, I'll turn it over to Bo Ewald. He's got a lot of historical perspective on the facility, and here we go.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm Bo Ewald, and live at 8 Franklin Lane, I think is the real physical address. Some of you know the name Ewald from Sarah. I'm not Sarah. I'm the migrant computer worker.
Is that the same one we have?
No, this is more pointed toward our airport. So we have an active community of people at the airport, pilots, people who own hangars, other interested parties, people who are taking flying lessons. And then we really explode the community, so to speak, when we have things like the fire, where we get lots of new folks in, helicopters, or the search and rescue that's just been going on. So it's a community that probably has 40 or 50 active, involved, interested people, and then at times it gets much larger than that. So what I did was, I should also say that starting about 3/4 of a year or so ago, we put together a little users group of pilots and hangar owners and other interested people. And we kind of got that thing rolling, and so I'm nominally, I guess, the chairperson of that or something. So I'm not speaking for the board or in any official capacity. And I put together some slides, which are really just talking points and things for you to be able to carry away, but thought a little bit about the history of the airport, the current status, why the airport we believe is important to the community, and then finish up with what do we need to do and kind of one request to you all. And so we'll just kind of talk through that. I'm glad to answer questions as we go. So sort of the bottom line at the start is on this third chart in, and compared to other Montana airports who are in mountain cities of about our size, we have almost the lowest contribution to the local economy. And we'll show you a slide in a minute that shows that. And it's like a factor of 10 less than sort of what the average is. So we believe that if we could improve things, we'd be able to have the airport and its users contribute more to the local economy. And secondly, the biggest current contribution to Red Lodge is certainly around public safety. So the firefighting, the search and rescue was based at the airport. We have air ambulance flights from there at times. And then it also contributes in many other ways. We've had the Beartooth Ball hosted there. We had the 8th grade graduation last year, and on and on and on and on. So it's a community place. And we think that if we work together, and it's a large community of yourselves and the commissioners and the airport board and then the user group, that we in fact can improve the airport so that we could bring another $5 to $10 million into the economy every year, and that we can make it better for firefighting, and which we think is going to be a bigger deal, and continue to serve the community events, and then really just sort of continue to improve the appeal of Red Lodge. I won't go through the history at great length. It's quite interesting to try to learn more about it. Barbara has helped in digging out previous airport board meeting minutes and that sort of thing. This is kind of a summary of them. And the site was sort of selected around 1935 or so. In the mid-40s, there was a fellow A.J. Patenaude, who some of you will know his name, a flying Frenchman, who'd been an instructor in World War II, came and started Red Lodge Airways here and started to train pilots, and then built a crop dusting business here. And he was also a city council member. And then the first hangars were built around 1950-ish. And the beacon came along from Dr. Belzer. There's a picture of the plaque to him from you all at your predecessors. The runway was paved around 1960, and then the FAA funding, as Bill mentioned, went away in the early 80s for the golf course subdivision. The FAA for airports, as part of the airport improvement program, will pay 90% of any work that's being done at the airport. So it's substantial. But at that time, and in the minutes of the commissioners meeting at the time, was a statement that, well, we're going to make the taxes that we'll have on all of these new properties in the golf course will more than offset the money that we lose from the FAA, and so we'll come out okay. That probably hasn't turned out quite that way. The runway was resurfaced for the last time around 25 years ago or so. And so it's kind of a struggle to keep the thing going. The status is on the next slide is that we have a paved runway of about 4,000 feet. And then we've created some grass runways. They're hangars for 20-ish aircraft. We now have heliport space for about 15 helicopters, and we had about 10 or so who were here during this fire. We'll show you a little bit about that. Search and rescue bases, we talked about public events. There is one part-time paid employee, and that's Jeff, who's the airport manager and chief snowplower of the airport, and then lots of volunteer time to just sort of keep the thing going. And there is some money, as Bill mentioned, that comes from hangar leases and that sort of thing. But as you see on the next slide, the reality is that the runway and the taxiways need to be resurfaced. They're crumbling at the edges, and there are now going to be some holes in the middle of the pavement. So we need to do some work on that. We need new taxiways. For hangar expansion, there are about 10 more interested parties who'd like to build hangars. I think Bill Morian is the next one up. He's designing a hangar as we speak, and others will follow. We don't have parking for larger aircraft, so during the fire, when the larger aircraft came in to bring in crews or parts or things, we kind of scrambled to figure out where they could park. So that's kind of an issue for us. And fuel, we have fuel situation which isn't maybe consistent with what other airports have. So over the time, we need to address that. Weeds is kind of not exactly a joke, but we need to address the weeds. We have a lot of weeds out there. And then there's sort of an inconsistent approach to water and sewer. So over time, we need to figure that out. Again, we don't have FAA money, and we returned down state money last year, as Bill mentioned. So on the economic impact, the latest information that we have goes back to 2016, when the Montana Department of Transportation did a survey that they do periodically of the economic impact of airports on overall in Montana, as well as on the local communities. And so this data on the one that says comparable cities and areas is taken directly from that. And we won't claim that it's 100% accurate, but I selected cities that are sort of our size, that are sort of within range of the mountains, that have ski areas not too far away, and you know that they're places that people like to visit. So you see the list on the left. And then I dug out what the populations were in 2019, and this other information is from 2016. We know in the case of Red Lodge, 4 employees is not exactly correct. There was one, as far as we know. But if you look at that, what I also, from a lot of data, selected just 2 other things, and those were the payroll, the direct payroll to people working for the airport authority or working for a fixed base operator or a mechanic or something like that at the airport. And then the overall economic impact on the area from those jobs and the things they purchase and people who fly in and that sort of thing. And then I averaged them. So at the bottom, you would see that the average population of those 6 cities is about our size, a little over 2,000. The average number of employees at those airports is about 60. Payroll is a little over $2 million a year, and the economic contribution to the local areas is about $6.5 million, about 10 times larger than what ours is. Now, some of these have, you know, there are big Forest Service operations there, or charter places, but we have none of that. So, and we believe that we should be able to attract some of those if we do some more work on there. So that's just, you know, there's probably an opportunity here to increase the airport's impact on the economy by like a factor of 10 if we do a few things. Now switching a little bit to the public safety side, On the fires, I went and dug out some other information about the fires that we've had for the last 25 years or so. And they're listed on the left side of this chart. And so it's the year and then the number of acres that were burned on the right side there. And you would see that in total, there were about 50,000 acres burned near us over the last 20 years. Interestingly, the Robertson Draw Fire in really 3 days went from no acres to almost 30,000 acres. And so it's about 60% of the total acreage that was burned. And I think that just portends what's going to happen as we get hotter and drier. It's going to be a bigger deal, and the better sort of air attack base that we have to fight those fires, the better it is not only for the forests, but also for everybody in town and people who own property out near the forest, not to mention the wildlife and all the rest. During this fire, there were 3, what the Forest Service calls heavy aircraft here. There were 5 others. There was an occasional fixed wing plane that came in, bringing in parts or supplies or crew. So it's kind of a mix of both. And there were probably 40 people on the ground all the time at the airport during that. And we worked closely with them, volunteering to see what we could do to make this a better place for them to use as a base. And so we created a couple of additional large helipads for the heavy helicopters and made ways for them to get fuel to the helicopters without having to drive on the runways and that sort of thing. So we think we're sort of improving our reputation as a good place to fight fires from, which we think is good for all of us. And then also that we made it easier for them to come back next time. And in conversations over the weekend, the one helicopter crew who's remaining said that they're, at least as far as they know, they're planning to be here indefinitely for the summer as a quick attack crew. Whether they said, of course, that could change overnight, but that was sort of the thing. And these are just some pictures from the various things that were going on during that week. And you would see a picture of the airport there with the various large helicopters nearest us and the smaller ones along. About half of the helicopters were out on missions with. I think when Andy and I went flying that morning to take those pictures. And then on the search and rescue side, recent in our minds, of course, is the Tatum-Morrell situation. The airport was the heli base for that. So we did take some Jet A fuel up to the end of the West Fork Road, and one helicopter operated from that for a while, folks from Yellowstone County. And about 5 helicopters, and when we talked to them and said, what do you need to do to be able to do searches from here more easily? We need Jet A fuel. The helicopters these days are all jet turbines, and they use Jet A fuel. So that we continue to be a base for that, and it's a great place for if one has to go through this situation. Then if I could take 30 seconds to tell a little anecdote. So on Saturday afternoon, I guess, or Saturday morning, the Morrells had some interest in seeing what the country looked like up there. So we took them flying in the trainer airplanes, the ones that we use on the 4th of July parade, which have great visibility. So we flew high over the western part of West Fork, and you could see the entire terrain laid out, and you could see how rugged it is, and how, we went by 4 of the 5 peaks that Tatum was going to climb and that sort of thing. And the family was really moved, and if anything, came close to having a little bit of closure, but maybe more importantly, a better idea of what a daunting task it was for all of the helicopter flights to try to find one person in this massive place where there are boulders as big as this building and all kinds of stuff. I saw them on Sunday morning as they were leaving, and Matt Morrell, the dad, said, when we came here, I knew I was going to hate Red Lodge. I just wanted to come get our daughter one way or another and get out of here and never come back. And I'm going to try to do this without crying. But he said on Sunday morning, he said, I've completely changed my opinion about it. He said, this is one of the best places in the world with the best people. And I'm overwhelmed by the effort that everybody put into this search. And I'm overwhelmed by the kindness of people. And in fact, I would think about moving here sometime. So So that was that's Red Lodge, you know, at the heart of it, that's what Red Lodge is about, and the airport contributed, you know, some money, part of that in the searches. We also occasionally do air ambulance things, mostly, the helicopters, well, whenever the accident occurs. This picture was out at Jim and Holly Bryan's last Friday or something like that. But sometimes we have fixed base, helicopters come in. There was a fellow doing a fence and the bobcat tipped over, so they aerobacted to come out of there. And then other community uses, we've had the Bear Tooth Ball, they're raising money for the hospital. Upper right picture, we've taken wounded warriors flying year after year. We had the 8th grade graduation, and I couldn't find a picture of that there last year. And then there's the annual, part of the annual car show. In the future, we can also do fly-ins and a collection of other things to bring more people into the community. I would kind of think about fly-ins being much like a car show. And sort of the bottom line here is the same as we started with, so I won't read it to you again. And I'm right at our 15 minutes. So the last slide says what we really need from you is a long-term commitment to the airport. That, you know, we're all willing to do work to try to raise money from a collection of places, starting with the FAA. So we're working, we've employed the consultant, as you have seen in that other package, to help us understand what the FAA's commitments or requirements are. And we'll work on that, but that's, in my opinion, kind of a long shot. They're going to have some things they're going to want us to do, or want the city or others to do that may or may not be compatible with the Red Lodge. So we'll see, like moving roads, for example. We also think the state of Montana is a good source, and we'll continue to work with them. We're going to take another run at trying to get some more money from them. This year, we were turned down last year. And we also believe that there are other opportunities for us to try to get grants from public sources. Maybe we can work with the Forest Service to help establish this as a better hell base for them, or do other things, and get fuel, get Jet A fuel in here, because we could get a grant from someone because they need it for the helicopters, for example. And we also think a little bit about creating a nonprofit where we could get grants or people to contribute that we could also then use to put next to the public money to try to expand things as we go along. But to do that, and before we launched on all that, we really need some form of commitment that you all support the airport and think that it should be around and that it's a vital part of the community. You don't have to answer that today, but we're just asking you to actually think about that. And we're glad to have other meetings and talk as long as you want about all of this stuff. So thanks for your time and attention today. Appreciate it. And for folks in the audience, I'm glad we can share copies of this electronically, because I've broken my printer doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we need to keep the dialogue going on it. Let's move on to resolution 3581, necessity statement of flight, Red Lodge North. James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a PowerPoint here, and in case anybody doesn't have it, I was trying to share it on the GoToMeeting, but I'm not finding the option that I normally find, the shared screen. And we're starting to run out of flow on time, so I'll just get moving. First off, I want to just say that the Urban Renewal District is a proposal that tonight we have the resolution of necessity. Necessity is statement of flight for the Red Lodge North area. I want to point out that the statement of flight is something we have to do, and that's what it's called. So that we have to be blunt with that. And tonight, the resolution would only be the first step. So I want to make clear that approving a resolution tonight does not mean that we will have an urban renewal district. It is simply step one. Step two would be going to the planning board and evaluating the growth policy to ensure that the urban renewal district would meet the intent and goals of the growth policy. Step 3 would be to approve an ordinance. We would need to do that by late November, so it can take effect this fiscal year. And then the final step would be getting all of the paperwork, including an urban renewal plan, to the Department of Revenue. The district is shown here on the screen, this white area, this yellow is not in it, just to be clear. The white area going up to the old gravel pit, including the school. This area was picked mainly because it's primarily all commercial. Didn't want to include much residential because it becomes a matter of where does it end. If you start including some residential, more residential is going to want it. And I'll give a little more background on why that is and why we don't want to make it too large. So another main point is that an urban renewal district, which would create tax increment financing, is not a tax increase. It would reallocate how future taxes within that district can be spent. So any taxable value within that district stays the same for the existing taxing jurisdictions. Any incremental value of tax increment within that district can be spent for projects within that district. So I'll just kind of move on here a little bit to next slide. The purpose of the urban renewal district is obviously to address blight issues, but also infrastructure issues. Kind of sliding back here, here's one example of blight, the Tea Cannery. It's one of the most iconic buildings in Red Lodge. It's been vacant for, I believe, over 40 years now. It's a brownfield site, which means it's got pollution problems. It could mean asbestos, different issues that'll cost money to fix. The street on one side is gravel. There's no proper driving lanes. We don't have proper curb gutter sidewalk. There's no parking at all, really, at the location. So if we created an urban renewal district, for example, those are things we could address. We could do paving, help with parking, help with brownfield. The fact that it doesn't have interior sprinklers could be a life safety issue. If for example, there was apartments in the upper floors, they would need to be sprinkled for a building this size. Urban renewal could help pay for sprinklers. It could also help pay for windows. So I think this is a good example of a project that could be funded with an urban renewal district. We've got a vacant building that's very historic and one of the most beautiful buildings in Red Lodge. And to really get it up and running to its full capacity, it's going to be a big job and a lot of money. Obviously, nobody's wanted to take that on for decades. We have, there's plenty of state code that addresses the Urban Renewal Act. Title 7, Chapter 15, Section 4200 addresses the urban renewal statutes. There's two different kinds. There's targeted economic development. Those tend to be more in county areas. An urban renewal district is what we would be looking at. The urban renewal and tax increment financing, and I know it's kind of confusing, so I'm just going to try and keep repeating it so people can fully understand. There's no tax increase. The base here is in yellow. The red is the current taxable area. The base, if we created a tax district this year, the taxing jurisdictions would collect the same amount of money here. And as we get improvements in the area and the taxable value increases, then that money can be used within that district. This is some financing and how it works in greater detail. Move on for some more things that TIF dollars can be used for. It can fund direct projects. Direct projects can mean it could mean impact fees, it could pay for water and sewer service lines. As I said earlier, it could pay for life safety issues within a building or outside of the building. For example, if we don't have enough fire hydrants or working fire hydrants, we could fix those or add new ones. We can do things like a revolving loan fund down the road if there was enough money, so that people, if they wanted to do a project within that district, they could borrow money at a low interest rate to do a project within that district. So we can renovate historic buildings such as the P Cannery. Renovation also means, for example, a facade improvement. So if there's buildings down there that we're interested, we could set up potentially a grant program to improve facades for buildings that are existing in that area. And if we were to do something like that, we could basically draw up a vision of how we feel that buildings would be appropriately designed in that area. We can connect to infrastructure, improve streetscapes and green spaces. We can actually remove unsafe decay, improve accessibility, mainly through roads. We can do studies or plans if need be as well. The tax increment finance district expires after the 15th year. It can be extended for up to 25 years. So to give you kind of an example, if we have a few good projects and new tax generation in that district within the first several years, we'll have a chunk of money that we can use for infrastructure projects. Now, if that money continues to grow and we feel confident in a large project, for example, we could then use that money to, say, rebuild 2nd Street connecting the high school to Broadway Avenue, put in curb, gutter, sidewalk, and all of those things. So if we were 10 years into the district, we could potentially do a 10-year bond, pay for that, and that would extend the district 5 years. And these are the steps: adopt a resolution of necessity by the governing body. That's where we're at tonight.
Can you go back to that one?
Yeah, I actually did not mean to press forward.
So the only things I've heard so far from constituents is talking about how this could affect school districts. Money to go, if it would somehow reduce the amount of.
It would not reduce. So the existing, as I said, the existing revenue within that district, it would stay frozen. So the assessed taxable value from today would remain for the incoming years. So there's no tax money being taken away from any of the taxing jurisdictions. They just wouldn't see the increase of any new projects for the short term. So, and just to be clear too, part of the reason why the Coal Miners Park and the high school is included within that district is that we could potentially do projects at their locations as well. We could potentially do a project at Coal Miners Park, such as a parking lot, for example. At the high school, we could do an infrastructure project there, for example, chip sealing parking lots or doing certain exterior projects. If they had a water or sewer problem, they could apply for help with that. So there would be options for them to take advantage of it as well.
So, okay, go ahead and ask the questions now.
Let's get through the presentation.
Okay. Okay, so management of an urban renewal district, there's an ongoing process of project identification. And initially, that would be done through an urban renewal plan. So we would have to create an urban renewal plan, which would have priorities. So, for example, right now, what everybody's talking about, large priority is we need workforce housing. So, for example, if somebody wanted to do a workforce housing project, we could have in our urban renewal plan, we will fund everything we can for a workforce housing project if you say do maximum density. So if they were to get an apartment building, get as many units as they could in there, we could then say, okay, we'll pay for the impact fees, we'll pay for curb gutter sidewalk, water, sewer lines, all of those things, if the money's available. So if somebody came in next year, we probably wouldn't have the money to do all that yet. So unfortunately, it might take a little time to accrue that increment. Secondly, the urban renewal plan and the management would have priorities. So let's say somebody wanted to do a hotel, we might say, you know, that would bring good economic development, and that's a primary driver of urban renewal districts, is to create new economic development. But we might say that if we have limited funds, that's a lower priority. So we would need to prioritize what we want. We could say workforce housing is priority number one. Basically, every commercial empty lot in town, I've had multiple calls on this year, people wanting to do condos. We haven't had anything move forward yet, but I suspect we will have applications coming into the planning board soon. But for example, if they came in the next year, we might not have money, we might say no, that's not our highest need at the moment, but we could prioritize it to say down the road that condo projects, if they utilize maximum density, will be eligible for these types of funds. We might say they impact these, but not water, sewer lines, service lines, things along those lines. So the urban renewal plan will be essential in management of the district. Project analysis, it's just a lot of little details about it. Constraints is obviously one of the important things, when we're looking at the cost of projects, maintenance needs, priorities. Larger infrastructure projects would likely have to come later. So basically, the initial years need to be towards creating that economic development, and later years, you have those higher cost projects that you can focus on if the district goes as you hope. Capital improvements, you can do all kinds of things: water main replacement, sewer systems, repaving streets, stormwater, PRV valves, any of those kinds of things. Beautification, we could do decorative street lights, utility boxes, etc. If there's areas within the district where there's blight and we don't want to force anybody to do anything, for example, we could have in our ordinance that we're absolutely not going to do eminent domain, for example. Now, the money can be used to purchase a property that is blighted, and the city could fix that up and sell it. I'm not so sure we want to go down that route personally, but those are things we could do. Now, if we have areas in the entrance that do need beautification, and I don't really want to pick on anybody, but I don't think anybody's really going to say the Schlesser property, for example, is a beautiful location, the concrete place. For example, the urban renewal district could put up fencing. With that money, we can put up 6-foot fence and kind of wall off certain areas as beautification as well. And that's pretty much the presentation.
We have a short time for questions, and then the rest of the questions we can kind of brought up when we bring the resolution up for action, if that's okay.
Sure.
Go ahead, Teresa.
So James, I think that you did, where Kelly started, I think you have answered the questions that were posed, yes, concerns about losing a tax base for the schools. So schools, city, county, those all stay standard. They just don't realize the bump from improved properties or anything until the end of the TIF term, right?
Correct.
So that's going to be a nice little bump later on.
Exactly. Yeah, and one thing that excites me about the district is that we have our growth policy and zoning regulations that say what kind of development we want to occur. And we would then have the ability to essentially give small subsidies to the types of development that our codes call for. And the type of buildings our codes call for. And those type of buildings are much higher property tax revenue generators. For example, the new dental office on Fifth, you've got a two-story brick building. It pays a lot of property taxes. You have something like Family Dollar, which is on a larger parcel, it pays less than half the property taxes as the dental office. And so we can encourage the type of projects that not only help property taxes, but create a lot more users on our water and sewer main lines where we have capacity. You know, if we have low density warehouse type buildings going in our community entrances, we're essentially wasting our water and sewer capacity on low impact type businesses. So where we can handle multi-story buildings, apartments, businesses that need a lot of water and sewer is in the community entrance. And we can then help make those projects happen. And then long-term, we'll be in much better fiscal shape because we'll have the type of development that essentially subsidizes all of the taxpayers because no residences in town pay enough in property taxes to keep the city afloat. It is our central business district, our multi-story buildings that essentially make up that difference.
Check it out right now.
Nope.
I'm good, make everybody good, wait till the resolution thing around. Okay,
I can read.
thank you, James.
Thank you.
Energy services provider for investment grade audit. Courtney.
Yeah, I'll just take a couple of minutes, because we've been working on this for over a year now, but, the interview committee did interview our final, energy service provider and made a decision, yesterday, and we chose, our recommendation for city council is to choose McKinstry. And we really appreciate about McKinstry that they are a little bit more local. Their, project director would be based out of Billings, so he already has a lot of relationships with contractors that we might need to be using in the future for renovations, upgrades to city facilities. And they also have a lot of experience with municipalities in Montana. So really, it was kind of neck and neck between the two. I think we would have been satisfied with either company, but with McKinstry, we feel really confident and comfortable in the work that they can do for the city.
Thank you. Any questions for Courtney on that? Dave?
So just to clarify, the expected action is that,
So with the, resolution that we had 2 months ago, I think, is to try to move forward with selecting McKinstry as our ESCO for an investment grade audit. And then from the investment grade audit, we will make a decision if we want to move forward with an energy performance contract.
So we'll bring that contract before council.
okay, I guess that was gonna be my question. So the mayor's gonna bring a recommendation or bring a contract for evaluation and potential approval by council.
Correct.
That's the next step. Is that correct?
Right, but tonight is just approving McKinstry as the
I-
vendor.
We made a decision.
We don't have anything we're approving tonight. It was just informational, correct?
Oh, yes, yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Pool splash deck vendor selection, Al.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name's Al Bloomer. I live at 302 Kainu, and I'm the chair of the pool committee. We're here tonight to give you information of where we are. We're operating under Resolution 3568, which the council gave us authorization, permission to proceed with the design of phase 2 and get some cost estimates. We reached out to several vendors on the splash deck. We heard back from 3. We asked those vendors to give us a design. We asked those vendors to give us some cost estimates for materials only. We heard from 3. We met with Interstate Engineering and the pool committee, which is James, myself, and the rest of the pool committee. And we selected Waterpipe Solutions, Inc. out of Utah. They came in with a very nice plan. And what we want to do now is, begin negotiation with them, for the actual cost to install it. We expect to get that information from them sometime in late August, early September, and then we'll come before the council, with actual cost estimates for not only the splash deck, but the pool house and the deck water slide. And we'll ask your approval for those expenditures. Tonight, we're just asking you to agree with us that Water Play Solutions is our best option for the splash deck.
Questions?
Yeah.
Tom, why don't you start this over?
Al, thanks so much for all you and your committee are doing for the pool. Amazing, actually. I just wondered, what was the reason for choosing this particular company?
What was the reason for what?
For choosing this particular?
Well, we looked at several different things. Number one, we vetted their people that work for and got recommendations. Number two, their pieces of the puzzle were what the committee liked in terms of the various stages. And number three, they were $133,000 for parts, and the others were $150 and $164.
Teresa?
So, Al, you're not afraid that they're gonna come back with a huge, a bigger number that would throw
No,
the
they're
balance
locked
off
into
for
these
installation?
numbers
But for
until
installation,
the end of the year.
installation though,
I'm sorry?
you haven't seen installation figures? Only
I have not, we're working on installation figures. What we're doing is we'll negotiate with them as to what the installation figures are. And once we get that number, then we'll come to the council and say, okay, the splash deck is gonna cost this.
Okay.
And as you all know, those funds will come from what we've raised and not from city funds.
So you're confident those installation numbers are not gonna throw this out of
No.
whack with the others or
No.
anything?
And I think what I heard is that we still have the right to, if they do, we say, no, we're not moving forward with it.
Or we can turn it
Yeah,
down.
you'll,
Yeah.
Dave?
Can you remind us who is doing the phase one?
The phase one is done by Langlis and
Okay, so
Associates.
it's not a player here, because I remember earlier conversations and timelines were if they would be able to work simultaneously rather in stages.
Right now, we're working on merging in, again, as part of the bid process in September, is whether we can stay with our current contractor or go to a different one. We're hoping that we can stay with this contractor, but we're not obligated to stay with this contractor. The expectation is if we stay on schedule, which we are, that the splash deck, the water slide, and perhaps the pool house will be done sometime no later than July of 2022.
And the second question I had is just some clarity on the ask, and I mean no offense by the question, you know, I love you and appreciate everything that you're doing here.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's the disclaimer.
That's a hell of an opening right there.
What I heard in the ask was for permission to begin negotiations. And I guess my understanding is that the negotiations will probably be the city, not necessarily the pool committee. Help me understand.
The negotiation will be
interaction.
done by your consultant, Interstate Engineering,
Okay.
and they will come to us, and we will be involved. Right now, the pool committee is hands-on on phase two.
Okay.
And so we're involved in every step, but the contract representative is Interstate Engineering, and he and Brent and his people will be doing those direct negotiations. They'll come to the pool committee, we'll say, okay, we think we can go to the council for that, and that'll be the steps.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. That was exactly my question and exactly the right answer. So.
And for your information, we have given the city $325,000 towards phase one, and we spent right at $28,000 already for phase two.
Keith?
Al, thank you for the tremendous effort you and the committee are doing.
Thank you.
The recommended company, is their office in Utah, or are they based in Utah, or are they Canadian?
The other two were Canadian. This was based in Utah. Their headquarters are in Utah.
Thank you.
Kelly?
So
Anybody else?
I guess what you'll do is vote yes or no at the next session. But hopefully we've answered your questions.
I think we have it on the agenda for action.
We have it, and I'm guessing that what we're going to do is approve Interstate to begin negotiations. Is that an accurate way
I
to?
would just, you're approving the vendor. That was what the question was, is you're agreeing that our selection of the vendor is appropriate, and you're allowing us to go proceed with negotiations.
So approving selection of water play is appropriate,
Yes.
and, is it really authorizing or supporting moving forward with negotiations? What's the wording you're looking for?
If you want to do that, but I don't think that's necessary, because.
So just approving-
That's understood as we move forward, yeah.
So it's just approving the selection of water play?
Yep.
And just for clarity, the individuals, 1, 2, 3, who, for the sake of the action?
The committee at that meeting was Interstate Engineering and the representative, James, myself, Anita, and Lindsay. And Judith was not there, but she went through it, and she's approved this as well as Laura. But we did a graduated grading scale, and you can see that water play and vortex were pretty close.
So the action is that we're going to be approving the selection of the committee and their selection of water play to move forward.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
Any other discussion? Thank you, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry if I rushed everybody, but I seem like we got through everything. So let's take a couple minutes to stretch, and we'll get to the council meeting.
And I will add, and we're not done. There's going to be some conversation. I will add that my humble opinion, you sacrifice yourself when you send out materials. Hey, Dave. On the page package. And so there's got a lot of things that still have to be answered when we get there at the end. Yes, sir.
Do I need to stay for the vote?
I don't think so. And it's the last thing, so if you want to go grab a drink and come back, if you want to go grab a drink and come back in an hour.
If I go, I want to.
It's gonna take a while.
I feel good about it, so that's what I wanted to get.
See, my question is why we even had to do this, because you gave us authorization to proceed. We're not spending any money, we're just informing you.
And so, well, that's why I wanted to say, because of all the kerfuffle we had, I just want to be very, very clear on things. So, for this, I would move to approve the selection of water play by the committee. That's what I want to make sure, I have the wording you want.
I don't want to go into negotiations, because Interstate, we may find something in negotiation that just doesn't work.
I'm writing it down exactly.
You approved the selection of the pool committee vendor of water play solutions.
No, I won't. So move to approve the selection of water play by the designated committee, which includes the committee and members of the city and city staff. Right. The committee and city staff.
The pool committee consists of city staff.
Just by the designated committee is good enough. Shorter is gooder.
Okay?
You can pick me tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be interesting. Tomorrow will be interesting. Tomorrow.
Those are the conversations we can have.
Okay.
Well, he was. I know. You have, and then, you know, the later we have from Sandy, the cheat list that says, here's the this, and this is the, well, maybe initial. No, I just make sure you have the list in advance. That's pretty good check. I wish we had that here sometime.
Actually, every board member should have.
Okay. Shouldn't our board president?
I can get that picture.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you for volunteering.
Yeah.
Get catapults thrown.
I don't think I have.
No, you know, I just read it. Okay.
I got 100%.
Exactly.
I don't know.
We're doing, remember, we had
Three years. The first part of it was.
and like, it wasn't like it was an entire life. Anyway, thanks so much.
Can you take a picture of the where?
Oh, sure.
Time to start the council meeting. Everybody rise for the pledge, please. Jody, you want to lead us?
Outside the
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call of officers. Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Eaton. Here. Lyman,
Here.
Westwood,
Here.
Whistler.
Here.
First thing on the agenda is appoint new council member for Ward 3. We received one application, that was Julie Ronning, and we would like to swear her in. Oh, I need a motion. Dave?
I move to appoint Jody Ronning to the opening vacancy in Ward 3.
I second it.
Discussion?
Let's do this.
Let's vote on it.
I would like to add just a little bit of discussion. As mentioned, we received one, and I feel extra better about it because the one is running unopposed for the vacancy in Ward 3. So what we're doing is we're just putting her to work 6 months early, starting her training curve. So I'm very comfortable moving forward with that under those conditions.
Roll call.
I
Oh,
think
go
it's
ahead.
really quick, I think it should be noted that Jody and other candidates that were originally to be on the ballot talked and discussed who would be the best candidate, and Jody came out as that person, so I'm excited to have her.
Good. Any other comments? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton.
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler. Yeah.
All right.
Now we need to take a small break.
See, she has all the papers there.
I know. Here I am. I, Jody Ronning. I, Jody Ronning. Do solemnly swear. Do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend. That I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the State of Montana, and the Constitution of the State of Montana, and that I will faithfully discharge, the duties of my office of city councilperson, City of Red Lodge, with fidelity, so help me God.
Got a
sign the paperwork and then you.
Yes, that
Don't touch the hand.
What was that?
I can't touch the hammer.
Only if he needs it.
We'll do another roll call of officers.
Larson,
Here.
Kelly,
Here.
Eaton,
Here.
Lyman,
Here.
Ronnie. Here. Westwood,
Here.
Whistler.
Here.
Minutes of June 8th.
I would like to make 4 motions to approve the minutes listed on the agenda. So the first would be the June 8th working session.
Second?
Discussion on the minutes of
June
June
8th
8th,
working session.
working session. Any comments? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie.
What?
Yes. I'm sorry. You second.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Okay, I would like to next make a motion to approve the minutes of the June 8th regular session.
Discussion. Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Okay, next, I would like to move to accept the minutes of the special session on June 15th.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
And last, I would like to move to accept the minutes of the working session on June 22nd.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
We're gonna get your work right off.
Warrants payable. Tom.
Okay. Kelly, I think you signed this
I
today.
did,
Yeah.
yep.
So we signed there, nothing particularly unusual. The big one, as usual, was the, trash pickup, Republic Services. We did spend $64,000, I believe is right, on 2 new police cars. But this money did not come out of taxes. It came from CARES grants. So that was a great thing. We got that, and so that's, people have asked me about that, why do we need new police cars? Well, we need them because they wear out, and so we got 2 new ones for our fleet, which was great. The other thing is, the other big expense, or this time around, was SID prepayments, $105,000. So the total was not particularly out of what we would normally tend to see. Lots of small things adds it up.
Teresa.
Just curious, there was something about $500 for JV General Store. I just couldn't track it to, what was that
So
for?
that's a bond, a resort tax bond refund, so.
Did they overpay?
No, so they're required to pay a bond if they're a new business. They're required to pay a bond of $500, we hold it for a year, and then when that year comes up, if their taxes have been paid, then they get the refund of the resort.
Mhm.
Any other discussion?
We need a formal motion.
We need a motion.
Do you want to make the motion to approve the warrants totaling?
Okay. Make a motion that we accept the warrants payable, $388,837.20.
I second it.
Thanks.
Any more discussion on this? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Officer reports, we did not receive that. We said Greg was acting chief, and, we just didn't,
And, it's been busy here, so Danae didn't do
Yeah.
we didn't get the quick and
So-
resort tax ones. But
Sorry
as
about-
soon as those are available, we'll get
yeah,
them out.
we'll get it out. Mayor's comments. I need an appointment for council president. I think that's come from you, council.
I move to nominate Dave Westwood.
I second that.
Good. Any other nominations?
I'll second that.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Okay, Dave, you're on the hot seat.
Felt it just go up 3 degrees.
Again.
Appointment to the Parks Board, this is up for action. I'm recommending Madeline Cornfield.
Move to approve the mayor's selection of Madeline Cornfield to the Parks Board.
I second.
Any discussion?
Madeline's great.
Yeah, I think she'd be an excellent.
Yeah.
She will be an
Yeah.
excellent
Good.
addition.
Addition.
Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Keaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
I do also want to bring up, speaking of Parks Board, we're still short a council rep on the Parks Board. So keep that in mind, that might, we need to fill that part of it. Update on the police chief selection. Pete was on that selection committee. You want to give us an update on that?
Yes, there were 5 of us, on the panel, and the mayor was the coordinator. We had 4 applicants. We had a series of reviews of their applications and interviews, 3 in person and 1 via the internet. We had a quite an involved matrix and scoring system. We made our final comments last Friday, and based on our recommendations, the scores, and the mayor's input, the decision was made on Monday morning, and I'll have the mayor introduce our new police chief.
At this time, I'd like to inform the city and council that I have promoted Sergeant Greg Schrock to the position of police chief. Good job, Greg. Want to get up? All right.
I hope you guys don't judge me on my public speaking skills. They're not the best. Currently, what I'm looking to do right now is just get everybody through the month of July safely. We have some major events coming up. First and foremost, it's paramount. The safety of the community is my #1 priority. Also, the safety of my officers. What I'm looking to do for the future of this department in service to the community is to, the best way to put this is stop the revolving door effect that the police department has with officers. I want this to be a sought out office for police candidates who want to spend their career. And that's currently what I'm working on, and everything obviously in July. I have the utmost faith in my team. I love my teammates. I certainly couldn't do this job without them, and I'm very happy to accept the position. And I hope I can do everybody here proud.
You will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Budget meeting report. We have been holding budget meetings with department heads, council representatives since February. We have it pretty well down. We still don't know what our mills are yet. But we thought that we should probably hold some public meetings, so they know where we're at as far as the budget is. So our first one is going to be July 22nd at 1 o'clock in the council chambers here. So The one in August will be August 12th. By then, we should know what our mills are and have some real solid numbers on that. That will be at 6 p.m. in the council chamber.
And then the final approval public hearing will be at the council meeting before they close at 6 o'clock on July 27th, or August 24th at that council meeting. So, but that will be the official public hearing that will be noticed.
Yeah. And I will say that council is the representatives of the people of this community. And so if there is any questions, they should go through council. And just bring those forward at that time. You can get them explained or change things or whatever we need to do. Teresa.
Could we hear the dates and times again, please?
Sure. July 22nd at 1 o'clock in the chambers. August 12th at 6 p.m. council chambers. We try to do that so that we can catch some people during the afternoon that may have to work at night. And then we do the afternoon ones to catch the people that just got off work and do the best we can. That is the end of the mayor's comments. We'll move on to public comments. Anyone can address the council at this time on any topic within the city's jurisdiction, not specifically on this agenda. We have, once again, if you're going to speak, stand up at the podium, give us your name, the address of your residence. Public comment will now only be taken by physically present at the city council meeting. So this is what all the councils are doing all over Montana. Everything is open, and that's the way we're going to be handling it, just like the rest of the councils. Public comments.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to me today. Like our officer back here, I'm not very adept at public speaking, so just bear with me.
I was going to say you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. All right. My name is James McGregor. I live at number 2 East Bench Road, out in Fox. I'm the owner of Beartooth Medicinal. We're the marijuana dispensary out in Fox. And it's come to my attention that perhaps the council is considering the possibility of allowing dispensaries into the city of Red Lodge limits. And more than anything, I don't really have a question. I'd more just like to offer our services to answer any questions you guys may have. I understand there's a lot of legalities that may not be very clear. We've been dealing with this since 2014, so it's something we're fairly well informed on. So if there's any questions that you guys may have, I would love to sort of help field those for you guys. I also do have a document that we have prepared that just sort of encapsulates what we're about and where we're moving forward with our business and what we believe that we would have to offer to you as a city council. Is that something I would leave with you, or?
So I would leave that with James, because that would be part of zoning. Correct. And you're going through that.
We're going through zoning.
Yeah. So James is our community development director.
Fantastic.
So that'd be great information for him.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just leave this with you then, James. Our cards are on all these as well. If anyone has any reason to contact me, please don't hesitate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And no pressure on the council, but the planning board essentially said, well, write regulations, so we don't really want to recommend on the legality question. Leave that to the council. So.
Well, there might be some help for you. Well, and there's a ton of regulations coming down the pipeline in the next month or two. The HB 1701 has been passed. It goes into effect January 1st, 2022. But there's still a whole bunch of regulations coming down the pipeline that we'll have a better idea what's happening with the next 2 months.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think as I understand it, that right now it's legal recreational use in Montana, but it's not legal for operations like yours to sell recreationally. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't go into effect until January 1st.
And then in October, you have to apply to be able to, for the right to be able to do that.
No, currently, as it stands, they're sort of grandfathering in anybody who is a current license holder.
Okay.
We have up until January 1st to go into business recreationally. We're allowed to operate medicinally up until that point. January 1st, we can operate both ways. We'll be allowed to operate medicinally as well as recreationally. We have 18 months from that timeline, basically, before other folks can come in and start applying for those licenses as well.
Okay.
They're really trying to curb, the outside corporations coming in and sort of swooping in on people like me. which is, I think, kind of a breath of fresh air, frankly. I'm glad to see that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other public comments? Public comments? Public comments? Okay, moving on. Moving to old business, resolution 3579, resolution requesting bridge and road safety funds. This is up for action. This is a public works thing. Teresa, do you want to fill us in on that?
Let's see, we went through this during the working session, right?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the resolution requesting distribution of bridge and road safety and accountability program funds. This is resolution number 3579.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Resolution 3580, surplus property. This is up for action.
Move to approve resolution number 3580, a resolution of intent of the City Council of Red Lodge, Montana to declare certain municipal property as surplus property.
Second that.
Discussion.
Again, this is one for the public that we reviewed in our work meeting, and there were no concerns at that time, so we're just moving forward with the official part of it.
Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
New business, union contract, Red Lodge City employees. Need to say anything more on that, Pete or Teresa? I think we discussed that during the work session. I'll take a motion.
I'll put it in front of me, sorry. Let's see. Move to approve collective bargaining agreement between City of Red Lodge and the Red Lodge City Employees Local Number 3526, effective July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Contract services, Diane Barris, Police Department Administrative Assistant, up for action. I'll take a motion.
Move to approve the contract for services for Diane Barris as presented.
Second?
Discussion.
My only question was answered by you earlier in the working session part of it. I didn't know if it was the same contract as before, but you said it was. So that was my only question.
Roll call.
Kelly,
Yes.
Eaton,
Yes.
Lyman,
Yes.
Ronnie,
Yes.
Westwood,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
So on the agenda, we have resolution 3581, which is actually 3585. No, it is
No, it is
3581.
3581.
Yeah, it's in your packet. We had a typo on there. It says 3585, but it is 3581. If that made any sense to you? Go ahead. This is the statement of blight, Red Lodge North. This is up for action.
Move to approve resolution amended to 3581, a resolution of the Red Lodge City Council finding that blighted areas exist within the municipality in and near the Red Lodge Community Entrance North area, and that the rehabilitation, redevelopment, or a combination thereof of such areas is necessary in the interest of the public health, safety, morals, or welfare of the residents of such municipality.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
I second it.
Okay, we can have a discussion.
Discussion.
Yes.
Yes.
James, is there anywhere where eminent domain might play into this? Because that's a very poignant topic.
Excuse me. That's a good question. And, you know, my recommendation would be that in our ordinance, that we would potentially approve in November, that we would specify that that would not be something the city would do. As I understand it, it is possible to do it. Very few cities in Montana have ever used it, and most cities in Montana specifically say they will not do so.
And I concur with that, because that would alienate a lot of residents. Thank you.
Yes, Teresa.
James, I was wondering if, between the time that this is, you know, determined blight area and you move on to working with the planning board, is there an opportunity to, based on recommendations that the planning board might have, to adjust that boundary, or is it once that we determine this is the blight area, it stays that way? Is there a period of adjustment?
I don't believe that there is at this point, if tonight's resolution is approved.
And then, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's
Yes.
James, we had talked a little bit about this before, about doing this, and when we talked, you were been looking at kind of more cherry picking properties throughout town. What was the reasoning behind just saying the whole north corridor versus like putting the old hospital in it, or the Eagle's Nest and the vacant lot, you know, just some of those other properties?
That's a good question, and Teresa brought that up to me as well, because I had talked about this possibility of creating an urban renewal district with multiple people. And generally, I was more in favor of doing the south end of town. The main reason for going with the north is we have more likely concrete projects that happen there. We've got an application before planning board in 2 weeks in that area, so we would have an increment, hopefully pretty much off the bat. On the south end, it's more, like I said, pretty much every commercial property that's vacant, I've had multiple calls on this year, but the way things have been over the last few weeks, it just looks like we're more likely to get a project in the north first. And it is a little more concentrated light, which makes it a little easier. The south side areas of concern are the old hospital, the Civic Center parking lot, Eagle's Nest. We have a lack of infrastructure behind Chateau Rouge, which is a large green space. We've got in front of the Lupine, we have an abandoned home. And we can come back and do a south. And that's part of the reason why I was specific with the Red Lodge Community Entrance North area is we could potentially come back with a Red Lodge South district as well down the road. But considering conversations I've had, I figured the north would be better at this point. And the south is going to be a little more difficult because it's a little more disjointed area. And we don't want to make it too large because we don't want to freeze that tax base for too long and too big of an area, which is part of the reason why I proposed a small district here of just commercial areas, except for a couple small connecting pieces of residential. So it would make it potentially more palatable to do a second district in the south at a future date, if there was interest in doing that.
Can I ask, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, so James, this does, if we pass this, this does not preclude dealing individually with other areas that might be just for health or safety or anything like that, right?
Correct. So we could do a second one at a later date.
Teresa.
I just want to understand how the urban renewal plan would come together versus a series of projects that might be prioritized. Is that up to the planning board together with you, or as they present themselves once the district is created? How does that work?
So I'll primarily work on the urban renewal plan. I'm estimating right now it'll probably be a 50, 60-page document. What part of the attachment behind the resolution right now is Exhibit A. Pretty much all of that will be part of that. So it'll just get more detailed. I'll reach out to some different groups that I think will have strong interest in it, and talk about ideas and priorities. I don't want to just exclusively try and suggest all the priorities. I do want to get input from potentially the planning board, the housing group, different, maybe the chamber, and get input and create that priority list. But that will be, I think, the one area where the urban renewal plan needs the most input.
And how will, those property owners impacted to become part of that? How are they notified or approached about this?
So actually, every property owner in that district, we will have to mail a public hearing notice to prior to the public hearing in November.
Any other questions of the table?
One more, sorry. Just a quick one, David. Attractive nuisance. I didn't understand what that term was, because it was announced, described that it fit the criteria somehow.
Pretend you're a 12-year-old boy
That was for
walking
the
down the
great
street.
building to go through, right? Okay, that's what I thought.
Is that a fair answer, James?
Yeah,
or-
it tracks trouble, yeah, got it.
Dave?
I have a couple of questions, James. The first one is regarding the money. As I've looked through this and as I've reviewed TIF, my understanding is, there was a couple of questions I had based on the presentation. The first one is that they used this starting point of a stagnating or declining property values, and that was going to be the line. And I'm not aware of anywhere in Red Lodge where that's currently happening, so that's a concern. And that may tie into my second question, which was urgency. But it is my understanding that the money we're talking about, for analogy basis, is the equivalent of we're promising whatever raises we get, whatever raise the city gets for the next 15 to 25 years, we're basically promising that for something else, as opposed to taking raises in the future and being able to spend that money in the future based on the needs at that time. We're making a decision now that we can live on X, and any raises we get is we're pre-assigning it based on that. Is that a fair analogy of how this is working?
Correct.
Is that just in this area, outlying area of the urban?
Yeah, just in that district.
Just the district, not the whole city.
Which is part of the reason why I focused on that commercial area only and not the residential aspects in that vicinity, but also a district that has not seen much economic development, and that we would potentially have our first carrot, in a sense, to get pre-development in there that eventually will pay significant property taxes.
So then the second part of that, I think, ties into Tom's question. Like I said, my second question is urgency. And what I heard, the response to Tom's question is that the boundary is set at the time that we make this declaration. That is the boundary that's set.
I do believe so, and I don't know that to be 100% for sure.
But
that's what I.
But I think you're probably accurate, and so then the question, as far as approving it tonight, becomes one of A, understanding the money, which I think we've clarified, but then the timeline and also the urgency. So the things that I heard having to do with the timeline is that basically we need to have an ordinance passed by November, which means that it would have to have 2 readings prior to November. With that as a timeline milestone.
But to just clarify, they don't have to be prior to November, they have to happen prior to the end of November.
Yeah, okay. So prior to the end of November, we have to have 2 ordinances.
Well, one ordinance, the 2 readings.
Right, I'm sorry. Thank you. One ordinance that has to have 2 readings. And then actually, they don't go into effect until 30 days after the ordinance. So in reality, the ordinance would need to be passed by the end of October in order to be in effect by the end of November.
No, it has to be by state law the end of November, so it takes effect by the end of the year.
Okay.
So basically, that ordinance has to be effective December 31st.
Okay, so it is approved by the end of November so that it's good for the year end.
Exactly. So
with that piece of information, what is the urgency? And I mean no offense by this, and we goes, oh, there's the disclaimer again. In my mind, you kind of stack the deck against yourself, because I had heard one casual reference to this in another meeting we were in, and at that point, it was a conversation about the south end of town. So this is the first time that council has received information, and it's a lot of information to absorb and understand and make a decision on. I understand that it's just the first step, and that there are a couple of additional steps beyond this. So it's not that we're tied into it as we start this process, but what I am hearing is we're tied into the boundaries, most likely. We have to assume that we're tied into the boundaries of it. So with that in mind, what is the urgency of approving this tonight as opposed to allowing some additional time for council just to understand this better, as well as to reevaluate and think about those boundaries rather than finalizing them?
Okay. Well, I've got two comments on that, and one, I tried to make the boundaries as simple as possible because I knew there'd be discussion on that. And so by making it as simple as possible, it was essentially including the commercial areas in that district and then the school as well. So that was why that northern boundary was chosen as it. As far as urgency, it was recommended to me by Kelly Lynch, the land use attorney for the Montana League of Cities and Towns, to do it as quickly as possible. And she put it bluntly as the legislature this last year almost gutted urban renewal, and that she felt that in 2 years that they will have more time to prepare for that, and she expects them to do so in 2 years. And she recommended doing it this year. If there's a hiccup, you'd have a year to fix any kind of hiccup. So that my conversation with her led me to believe I should try and push this forward soon. I also talked to Janet Cornish. She's a private sector contractor who's worked on a lot of TIF districts. I called her. I was going to see if maybe she might be interested in doing some contract work with this and what her price would be. She's doing one for Wolf Point right now, and she said that's her last one. She's not doing it anymore. But she also said the legislature came close to succeeding and gutting certain things, and we should do so this year. So,
But this year is not necessarily correspond with a declaration tonight necessarily. It's just the sooner we have it done, the sooner we're on that process and path.
this resolution has to be approved this month, so we can't say come back in October with this resolution. The resolution, the statement of blight has to happen by the end of July, and then in the meantime, the planning board does their resolution. That has to be done before the first reading of the ordinance. And for that first reading of the ordinance, we have to mail out the public hearing notice to all the property owners.
So I heard you add a new timeline milestone that the declaration of blight must happen before the end of July.
This resolution.
I don't remember reading that. Is that on this clock time page or?
It should be.
I see an updated URD work plan and budget, but I didn't necessarily see the July. So that's a new piece of information for us.
So I guess we're trying to make sure that if we defer this to the next meeting, that we still have enough runway to get it through, to meet all the milestones by the end of the year and get this moving.
And I thought we did, but I just heard him say, no, we don't.
Well, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear, no, we don't. So rather than, I don't want to, I see that there's been a lot of thought put into this, and I like that it's got modes of transportation considered, multi-modes of transportation, problem areas that we've all known about for a long time. So I'm feeling more inclined that, this is a good opportunity. I don't think that it's something that, if it creates an obstacle for meeting the milestones along a runway that gets us moving, I'd rather not see it waste another 2 weeks.
Jody.
James, what happens, I know you're notifying the people in this district, but what happens if, one of the businesses does not want to do what you want them to do?
If one of the businesses
Down there does not want to address the
so-called blight that they have, you know, or it's a use that's no longer allowed, like Schleppler or, you know, mechanic.
So in a case like that,
Oh.
yeah, just
Fair
to give you a little more information about what would happen if the district is created. There's two ways to manage the urban renewal. And one is purely through the city council, and the second is through an urban renewal agency. So if this were to pass the city council will then decide, do we want an urban renewal agency, or do we want to make the fiscal decisions on that? The common denominator often comes down to the number of businesses and number of residents. There's not a lot of residences down there. There's not a whole lot of businesses down there. So it could come down to, are there enough people that could serve on that, who live or own a business within that district? But as the urban renewal plan is created, those kinds of questions of yours would need to be addressed in it. So in terms of Schleppler's, for example, maybe they decide, you know, we're never moving, we're staying here. Well, if they came to planning board today, the planning board would likely say, well, if it's an allowed use and you do X, Y, and Z, which includes putting up a 6-foot solid fence, you can do it. We can't retroactively tell Schleppler's, you need to put up a 6-foot solid fence around the property. The urban renewal district, money could be used that way. So whether we have an urban renewal agency or the city council making those fiscal decisions, it would be up to that agency or council to say, this is how we will address blight at this particular property. You know, as Pete has asked about eminent domain, we're not going to do that. So when it comes to addressing blight, we may have to get creative in some ways, and it may come down to the decision that we just want to hide it.
Teresa.
So I know we don't want to do eminent domain, that's just like, that sours everything. But if you were to approach, for instance, a business and suggest that, you know, this is an opportunity to address the blight and whatever recommendation they might be provided, should they not have the funds, or I'm just trying to understand the partnership with the city and what the city can do to help facilitate those changes rather than just, you know, making it feel like there's something being imposed.
Mm-hmm. You know, and blight can come down to so many different topics. It can be graffiti, so we could therefore just go ahead and fix it. It can be just unsightly things on property that we could hide. It could be dilapidated buildings where we could potentially say, get rid of these buildings and we'll pay X% of the cost to get rid of them. If the answer to that is no, then it might be, well, we're going to be putting a fence up in the property. Or there's so many different types of blight and so many different ways to address it that it's kind of hard to pinpoint, you know, specific kind of a generality on all these specific types of blight to say how we would address each one. But I think the first step is to try and work with the landowners and see if you can come to ways to help fund getting rid of blight. And on some properties, there's probably, it's not a financial endeavor so much as it's just some time to clean things up. And if you can't do that, then it's basically comes down to hiding blight.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please.
I'm all for health and safety and welfare of people when it comes to sanitation or exposure to elements. But I'm not in favor of telling people what to do with their property just because they may not look pretty. And I think this is just another example of government meddling too far in people's business. And I think whether we postpone it or vote on it. We live in Montana for a reason. And we don't live here because we want to be regulated with 65 different levels of government. And when you say blight and you cannot give us specifics on enforcement, that sends a bad message.
Well, I want to be clear, Pete, the urban renewal plan, which needs to be approved by the city council, will give direction on that. So
And I'm not challenging you.
I'm not trying
Yeah.
to,
It just rings of government interference to me.
I don't know that the intent is to go out and search for blight. I think we all seen it, we all know where it's at. The intent was to be able to create the district to help people that buy the pecan factory, to help them with incentivize it, so that it's like, please do something with this building. If you're gonna do, if you're gonna do apartments, we're gonna pay for the impact fees, we can put a street in for you. People that are improving blight, or like that piece of property, and we can help get rid of whatever that blight is on there, so that they can build something new. I don't think it's an enforcing thing.
And there are various viewpoints on this, and I respect yours there.
And I respect yours.
But I still concur that we're incurring on people's private property issues. And I don't think, and with the exception of health and safety, that it's government's job to do that. And that's all I have to say.
Any other discussion at the table? Dave?
I have a follow-up to Pete's question, for James. Because to me, I'm hearing two issues. One of them, quite frankly, sounds to me like code enforcement. So, a lot of these things, if they are concerns, particularly if they're health and safety, we could address already via code enforcement. True? Not true?
there's probably some instances where we could do code enforcement, but for the most part, no.
Okay. So then the second thing that I heard was that the specifics and particulars are still yet to be defined in the actual ordinance to do that. Is it feasible to write that ordinance so that it is restricted only to issues of health and safety?
I don't believe it is. For example, the title of the resolution is necessity of blight. That is a requirement. That is one of the things you have to show to have an urban renewal district. So we can't just say there's no blight there. Otherwise, we can't have an urban renewal district. There's about 70 urban renewal districts in the state. Blight is kind of an ugly word, and people can take offense to it, but that's the wording we have to use. And then a couple of more things I'd like to just stress is the number one purpose of an urban renewal district is economic development. And when people come in with projects that are clearly going to create jobs, create housing that support our jobs, those are the projects we can help make happen. So that's the number one goal here. And removing blight can be a bonus, but economic development, creating housing, being able to help move projects forward is the overarching goal of the district.
Teresa?
So what I'm hearing is it's really up to us to steer the direction of this. And blight also means the non-economic development, which is true. It's been sitting, many of those areas sitting untouched and undeveloped. So blight is a really bad way of putting it, but that's where it comes to meet the qualifications. So I think it's up to us to drive the intent of this the way we want it, is to incent the opportunity and not to drive enforcement of things that, somebody's making judgment on against, particular. I mean, it's not to attack, it's to incent.
Exactly.
Jody?
I just had a question. If we move forward and approve a urban renewal district plan, can a future council change that plan?
Yes, they can. And in all likelihood, it'll probably need updating every few years.
Okay, so a future council then could add eminent domain if there's something down there that they don't like.
Well, the if it's an ordinance, they would have to change an ordinance. The urban renewal plan, what will likely need updating if it's a successful district, let's say we get, 2 large apartment buildings, and let's say that the urban renewal plan's #1 priority, in that original urban renewal plan is workforce housing. And let's say, best case scenario, within 5 years, we've got 100 new workforce housing units, and we're in good shape there. At that point in time, that urban renewal plan should be updated, and we may say at that point, you know what, we could really use a hotel now, and we would like to do more incentives for a hotel. Or we'd like to see more condos walkable to downtown, because we're afraid we're gonna need a parking garage, and those cost $25,000 per parking stall, and 100 stalls is gonna cost $2.5 million, and if we can get more people here, walkable to downtown, that's something we don't have to worry about for more years. And so we want to incentivize dense condo development more than what potentially the original urban renewal plan does. So the original urban renewal plan might say we may incentivize condos by paying a small portion of the impact fees. I don't know what that decision will be, but down the road, there may be more reason to do more incentive for something like that.
I understand where Pete's coming from, and I'm sympathetic to the idea that, you know, we don't want to over control people's use of their property. I really am. But on the other hand, I think that people who live in a community have a responsibility to the community, not to have, you know, not to negatively impact the environment. So when people come into town and they see, you know, I mean, I've had a lot of people say to me, geez, you know, Red Lodge is a great place, but man, coming into town from the north is like, you know, can't even believe it. So I think what we need to do is concentrate on some way to incentivize cleanup. And I guess you're saying the word blight is fixed in sort of legal terms, right? I don't like the term, but if it is, it is. We know what we can do about it. But I think rather than try to come up with some strictures to enforce something, I think we can find ways to encourage people, if we need to, and maybe strongly encourage people to clean up their place and look after their property, because they're part of the community. It's not like if they don't want to do that, they can move out to Clark or someplace where nobody, you know, gives a damn, basically, and do what they want. But if they're going to live in town, right here in the city limits, I think they have a responsibility.
So going back to my earlier question that I had started, you know, kind of about the code enforcement part of it, and then I was sitting back and listening to the conversation. The second part of that sentence even was that what we're looking at is the potential to incent people to get the desired behavior. And that's not a new concept for government. I mean, you get to deduct home interest, there's child credits, marriage, you know, so that's not a foreign concept. But the thought that comes to my mind is we could do that on an as-needed basis in the future with or without a TIF district. This money that we're promising are whatever future raises we get, we're just making a decision now to allocate it. The reality is we could do that on a case-by-case basis. We could say, hey, we want to set aside some money we think is beneficial for the city to go halvesies on a fence around said property. And the same money would be available, because the money that we're talking about is just future tax properties coming in. And if our taxes go up, that money is still there and available.
you'd have to have an ordinance or a resolution or something for each case by case by case, and then managing it all separately.
In a sense, you would, and is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, the incentive is not there unless somebody knows to ask for it, if you haven't established those boundaries and a plan. It's just haphazard. It hasn't happened all this time, has it? Hasn't happened. It's not happening. This is my 2 cents.
No, I appreciate that.
Let's move back to the resolution.
I think we're missing is by forming this district, what you're actually also creating is a funding source. You're actually tying some money to a funding source that's available to help that person. If they determine they want to do this on this property, they're hopefully, well, yeah, the city can help you, we can help you out with this. And like it potentially, as the years go on, it could get bigger and bigger. Like you said, a revolving fund possibly to help each of that in that district. What you're kind of doing is tying together a deal to create a funding source. And in this business, in the municipality business, funding sources are hard to find. And I don't think it's a bad idea. I think that it's going to take some in the planning board to come up with the real deal. But I said, you're going to create a funding source that's available to help what you consider Blythe might be his treasure. You know, one person's junk is somebody else's treasure, but you might create a funding source to help him with his. I mean, it's kind of a balancing act right there.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd like to point out as well is, we have growth policies that where we state we don't want sprawl, we want infill development, and we have no incentives. And I get calls, especially this year, all the time from people wanting to do a project. What incentives do you have? Nothing. It's too expensive. They walk away. It's happened over and over this year. And we would actually finally have a way to help incentivize projects and incentivize projects that help us dramatically long-term fiscally. Because, as I mentioned in the dental office case, the dental office, when they first came to me 5 years ago, they wanted to do a single-story strip mall development. Well, no, your central business district, you can't design it that way, and we really want to see multi-story. They came back with that design, and if we had a strip mall there, we'd have a dental office, that's it. We have, I believe, 3 other businesses in that building, and that means that those businesses did not have to build out in the entrances. They were able to go central location, and we have green space for new development. So when we can incentivize multi-story, for example, we're creating more users on our existing infrastructure. That means we've got more water users, we've got more property taxes coming in per square foot, which means we have more users to help pay for water and sewer projects. We have more users, more property taxes helping plow streets, pay for schools, general fund, county taxes, all of those things. And if we just allow single-story structures in our entrances that don't utilize their space widely, what are we going to do for housing? We're going to go out by the spires, extend further out. We're going to have to take on new water, sewer, streets, depreciating assets. And where's that money going to come from? We're going to have to raise taxes at some point. So if we can do infill, we increase our water and user rate, or fees, I should say, collection by the number of users by 20% on our infrastructure that we currently have. That's 20% more money on our existing infrastructure, which means we don't have to raise rates as much, and we have more money to fix water and sewer and streets. So infill development is how long-term the city can be financially healthy. And this would give us that incentive to encourage people to do that type of project. Now, of course, somebody may still come in and want to do a project that doesn't meet that criteria, for example, and they may still do it, but they don't have to be incentivized.
So I think
Sorry.
Sure.
One more question.
Okay.
So, because I don't know if it was answered before, but it is about the area that this is, that you're proposing, that it can't be changed past this.
I don't believe so.
So I think what we're doing is, the step that we need to go through is we need to recognize that we have blight in this area that we're setting up. We're kind of getting hooked into, we're gonna be telling people to clean their yards up and things like that, and actually it's all about economic development. So if somebody does buy a place, just an open lot, we can help them with their impact fees if they're gonna build an 8-unit apartment house. If there is blight on there, we can help them with the removal of that, plus incentivize with, with impact fees and things like that. Or we can help the Peak Cannery with a sprinkler system when they get to putting apartments on the 3rd floor, if that ever happens. I think blight is just something that we have to recognize that we have.
Correct.
So Mayor, I know that I know we've had the designation as an opportunity zone, and the hope that was that would incent people to build multiplexes or workforce housing or some affordable homes. That went nowhere, and it didn't seem like it wasn't a good fit at all. And I think this has potential to help incentivize. Apart from that, and it's more in the city's control. So I still think it's a good idea. That's all I have to say.
My only concern, like I say, is we approve an urban renewal district plan, and a future council decides to change it to allow for eminent domain because they get some big developer that wants to come in, and yeah, it's great economic development, but then you're keeping businesses.
Well,
out of
that
area.
would not be, that would never be able to happen because that would be, a city cannot do eminent domain for that kind of purpose.
It was upheld in the Supreme Court, I love it.
Eminent domain for private construction.
Yes.
I was pretty sure that got struck down.
No, it passed. I mean, it was upheld, it was like a very close type thing, but.
Is that Rhode Island or Connecticut?
Yeah, because it was in, they put a Pfizer in and they wanted to do this eminent domain in this one area for economic development because the town was basically dying. And because it was in their urban renewal district plan, it got held with the Supreme Court and homeowners got kicked off of their property.
Well, I think at any time, council can rewrite ordinances about anything.
Right. But that's my only concern.
Okay, I understand. I haven't opened it up to the public yet. Is there any more discussion at the table?
Mayor, will you plan on coming back to the table after we open it up to public, or is this the last chance at the table to speak?
I can open it back up. I would like to hear what.
I will withhold my comments until after public comment.
Okay. I'm gonna open it up to the public comment. Now,
I'm the chairman of the Planning Board and Zoning Commission, and James asked me to come and listen to this tonight. This is the first time I've heard it. But we're right now in the process of updating and renewing our zoning and our planning board. I would really like our panel to review this and come back at you with a recommendation. I think the concept is good, but there's been a lot of questions in it, and zoning is one of them. So if possible, I'd like to give the planning board a chance to take a hard look at this and come back at you with a recommendation.
And that is part of the step.
Yeah, just to be clear, Al, this would be the step that kicks off the steps to go to planning board.
Well, so when you say I can't make changes to the outline and all that stuff, I mean, that planning board is very experienced. They're gonna have some input. And so when you say there's some fixed things in there, that's what got my attention.
The urban renewal plan that would be the guiding document on future projects. And I think it's really important that we have those discussions with the planning board and get input from other groups. I do think it's important, in my conversations with people from the state and experts in this field, that we keep it to commercial districts as much as possible, which is what I have done here. So I think, could the district be altered slightly? Yes. Should it be altered very much? No. That's my belief and conversations I've had from experts on urban renewal.
Tim.
Yep, Tim Weimer, 48 Remington Ranch Road. Most of the comments I wanted to make have kind of been made. To Jody's point, that the city council could add eminent domain. City council can do anything 2 years from now, 5 years from now. This could fail, and they could bring it up, the council could bring it up next year and pass it with eminent domain in it. So, you know, looking at what might happen down the road is you know, I'm sorry, I don't know a better way to say it. Time. Maybe I'm naive, but I've talked to James and listened, and I've read through all the paperwork, and I've looked at this around the state, and I see nothing but positives coming from it. I see this to me is not an opportunity to go to some business and say, you can't do this or you have to do this. This is an opportunity. If I, as a developer, owned a piece of land and I wanted to build an apartment building, and I said, well, I want to build high-rise, expensive condos, and I only want 4 in this space, that the city, the urban development, could say to me, if you build 8, we'll help you. And that's the way I see it, is like building strength and structure rather than telling somebody what they can and can't do. I don't see anything in there. I mean, I realize there's the opportunity to tell somebody what to do, but I don't see that as the intent. I've never heard that as the intent. And I honest to God, I think if you're seeing it, you're looking for boogers. It's, this is nothing but a positive for the town. It gives us a direction to say that, you know, we could do this piecemeal. We could, but like Teresa said, we haven't and we ain't gonna. What you need is you need a concentrated effort. You need a group of people sitting down with a structured document that says, this is what we're gonna do. And then you don't fail. Without a plan, you are going to fail. Without structure, you're going to fail. The minute you put this together, and it's, you know, it's going to be with the planning board. Nobody wants to do it without the planning board. Nobody wants to do it without the council. Nobody wants to do it. I mean, the business people will be invited. Tell me if I'm wrong, James, but the way I understood, because I've asked James all these questions. Apparently I have more time on my hands than some on the council, but I've been bothering James, texting him, calling him, emailing him, and he's probably got a lot more done this week if it worked for me. But again, I don't see this. I understand the feelings of negatives, and maybe people have been burned, but I think, you know, that I just look at the positives. And I implore you to do that. James is asking me, blighted is an awful word. Great, fine. But damn, if you look out there, there's some blighted areas. And there are some areas that are an attractive nuisance. And I didn't understand what attractive nuisance was either. And I looked it up, and then I explained what it was to my wife, and she said I was an attractive nuisance. It draw people in and it hurt them. I will finish. Please pass this part of it, and then let's go to work in producing the plan that works for everybody and does what that end goal is. That end goal is to have a beautiful entrance to this town. It's to have workforce, affordable housing, housing for everybody. I told James I'm going to go off kind of a bit on a rabbit trail. My family, when we moved to Cody, Wyoming, lived in a fourplex. I was in high school. My brother was out of high school. But we owned a business there. But we needed a place to live, and we needed a rental. We don't have that here. Let's produce it. And you need a plan. The people that you could attract, the people that we're pushing away right now, can make a big difference in this community in the future by giving them a place to move to and produce for us. Thank you.
Can I just ask one more question?
We're on public comment.
I'm sorry.
Any other public comment? We'll bring it back to the table. Go ahead, Jody.
I just wanted to ask if someone comes to you with a project, does it have to take place in that urban renewal district, or can that district help pay for the old hospital being redone?
It could not, no.
Okay, so it has to be out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
More comments at the table? Dave?
I think we're nearing the point where a good friend of mine would say that everything's been said, just not everybody has said it. The one word that comes to mind that I think has not been said yet, as we talk about incenting and trying to get a specific behavior, is subsidy. A couple years ago, the Cooper House came and the city wanted to come and, or they came to the city and wanted us to waive the hookup fees for doing that. And we had discussions on the planning board, of which I am a member. I'm the council representative there. And I was surprised pleasantly, but at the insightfulness, and it was you, James, who basically said, if we do that, the reason we're able to do that is that the city is in fact subsidizing our ability to finance that. And as I look at this and I say, what we're doing is we're promising our future raises and tax income from that district and area, I still see that as a subsidy. We're basically going to incent behavior X or Y, but the city is still subsidizing that. We're just subsidizing it with a particular set of money that we've pre-identified, but it's still a subsidy. We're only able to support project X because the city is subsidizing it by giving them money that we would otherwise be able to spend someplace else. And that's a little bit of an issue for me.
Well, I think, you know, the difference between, say, the Cooper House and instances where urban renewal money could be used for projects, one major difference is we're not asking our other water and sewer users to pay for the hookup fees and increase capacities. We've got the urban renewal district that does that. Secondly, the urban renewal district plan would therefore have, kind of addressing what Tim said, if you do 4, we're not giving you anything. If you do 8, we are, and we're incentivizing increased users where we have the capacity, and in the long run, that is a financial benefit to the city. So if we get a 4-unit proposal on a 20,000 square foot property where we've got unlimited water and sewer capacity, we're not using our capacity wisely. And if we can incentivize using that capacity wisely where we have that capacity, long term, we will collect more revenues and it will pay for itself. But when you're talking a single family home, I think that's it's a very different scenario because there's no benefit from the city to subsidize a single family home where eventually we're going to get a single family home. If we can get 8 units instead of 4 through that incentive, long term we make that up. So I do think there's a difference between those two cases.
Teresa.
I'm going to look at it a different way and hopefully convince you to see this also, Dave. So we had a CFO at Verizon, and I know that certain individuals would turn red in the face when he talked numbers and what he wanted to spend for things. And what it came down to was, and he was right, it's not what you pay, it's what you get. What does the city want? Do you want the economic development up there? Do you want workforce housing development? Do you want to incent and assist in any way possible the growth with the control that you want as well? You're getting control, you're getting rid of the blight, you're getting housing. It's, yes, if you want to see it that way, that you're giving something up, but you're getting so much more.
And for the record, the word blight doesn't bother me at all. I have no issue calling a spade a spade. That doesn't concern me.
It needs help.
Any more comments at the table? Roll call.
Curtelli.
No.
Eaton.
Yes.
Lyman.
Yes.
Ronnie.
No.
Westwood. Westwood.
No.
Whitliff.
Yes.
3-3.
Yes. Been waiting 3.5 years to do that. Thanks, Jody, I'm so happy you're here.
I'm glad we provided you that
You
opportunity.
can have the hammer. Whew. All right. Last thing on the agenda, the school flash deck vendor selection. Dave,
Move to approve the selection of, water play by the designated committee for phase 2.
I second it.
discussion. Discussion from the public. Roll call.
Kelly.
Yes.
Eaton.
Yes.
Lyman.
Yes.
Browning.
Yes.
Westwood.
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
Correspondence. I think we
There was just a pool.
put in the last report from the pool committee. Thank you. Number 14, Jody.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
All right, that's yours. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Can I get a copy of
Okay. I am